Welcome to Leading from Being with hosts Marty Spiegelman and Todd Hoskins. Together they weave original human wisdom, play with language, and explore leadership and consciousness to help you create more thriving people, teams, organizations, and communities. Today they continue their series on landscapes, exploring wayfinding, what it means for humans to stop following the way and begin finding our way home. Stick around for takeaways and Todd's essay on potentialities at the threshold. Get show notes and much more at leadingfrombeing.com.
Hello and welcome to Leading from Being. My name is Todd Hoskins and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Marty Spiegelman. Hi, Marty.
Hey, Todd, it's good to be with you. And hello to all our listeners. Today, we're adding another episode to our series on landscapes, and this time we'll be focusing on navigating the land, finding our way across new territories, and igniting our natural human capacity to be wayfinders.
That sounds exciting, Marty. Please get us started.
All right. So I'm going to start with something a little different than wayfinding, but we'll weave it all together. To open, let's consider that nearly every human culture understands the principle of oracle, meaning both a physical locale and the inherent dynamic in that locale that allows direct communication between humans and larger powers, whether they be powers of the land, the seas, the stars, the gods, or our own luminous ancestors. And when I sit with the elders in Peru these days, they tell me that the oracle for Western culture is Google. It's become a mythic term for them. And so I've ended up nicknaming the power of our very own oracle, the goddess Google, and I consult her often. Now, listeners, don't be offended. It's the principle of the thing, the principle of oracle. And besides, we have to keep a sense of humor these days. Otherwise, it gets too dark. So yes, I consulted the goddess Google when I was gathering my thoughts about wayfinding. And I shouldn't have been surprised, but I always am, when I found out that our Western understanding of wayfinding is the exact opposite of the original meaning of the word. And we've done this turnabout with a lot of words in the English language. My favorite example being the word myth, whose root word mythos used to mean the true story of a people, yet now myth refers to something that is not true. So you might be wondering what happened to the meaning of wayfinding. Well, originally, wayfinding was the art of literally finding one's way across never before encountered territory. It meant to discover the lay of the land, to set the trail in memory, to be the maker of the first map, step by experiential step. The modern meaning of wayfinding has to do with our incredible human capacity to first create a landscape, an architectural geography, a city, an airport, a planned territory that initially exists as a detailed map, a sheath of blueprints, and then becomes a three-dimensional reality as we build it out. And once it takes shape, it then requires what we call signage to show people the way through this already known man-made landscape. So instead of finding our own way, we're told where to go. And our first experience is with two-dimensional information on the signs. And our secondary experience lies in trying to match the written instructions to the man-made reality we're trying to move through. Now, in contrast, let's take a moment to consider Lewis and Clark, great explorers of unknown territory, or the Polynesian navigators who mapped pretty much the entire Pacific Ocean, or the Vikings, or any of our great nomadic cultures. Who built the landscapes they traveled? What language were those signs in? It's worth considering. Yeah. And As anthropologist Wade Davis says about wayfinding, he says the entire science of wayfinding is based on dead reckoning. You only know where you are by knowing precisely where you have been and how you got to where you are. And as the elders say in Peru, don't forget what you already know. This is very different from our modern understanding of wayfinding. So a few questions come up for all of us at this point. Do we remember who built the landscapes of our planet? Do we humans remember how to speak the powers of nature? Do we remember any of our original human capacity to dialogue with the landscapes of our lives and find our way through strange territory, or walk into the unknown and make our way to thriving, or enter the landscapes of our own imaginations and find our way to quantum leaps in creativity? The evidence, I think, is becoming quite overwhelming that the answer to these questions, all of them, is no, we do not remember. Now, you don't have to go far from your own front door to find this evidence. People everywhere are feeling more isolated and uncertain, wondering where they belong, even if they belong, to what they might belong. And when we're feeling so disconnected and really unaware of how deeply we're actually woven into the whole of life, we begin to believe that there aren't sufficient resources for us to be even okay, let alone succeed. And many people don't remember how to take one step into the landscape of their lives, let alone embark on a journey of wayfinding. So my sense of this is that it means that we don't remember our own human nature, because the truth about humans is that wayfinding is in our souls. We were able to find our way across continents by listening to the land we walked. We instinctively knew to learn from the land. We knew to be guided and nurtured and even matured by the intelligence of the territories we traveled. We understood that the land showed the way and we followed, becoming wiser and more connected with every step we took. We humans were born to absorb geographies, to become embodiments of the wisdom of the landscapes we traversed and hunted and eventually settled on. This is the purpose of wayfinding, to find our place in the landscape of life. And as we touched on before, wayfinding is not just limited to land. We've used our natural wayfinding ability to map entire oceans and vast watersheds, all in order to connect into life and ultimately to discover the best coordinates for sowing the seeds of culture. To find the coordinates of the oracle that would demand our participation in that critical human-to-spirit conversation. Critical because it's this dialogue that keeps humanity on track and evolving in our role as part of the conscious universe. This human to spirit, human to land, human to all the elements dialogue keeps us from behaving as though we own the planet. So for us as a species, wayfinding has been a fierce and fabulous dialogue, one in which the land and the waters and the maps of stars in the skies have guided us to our belonging, to the coordinates that would become the origin points of extraordinary human cultures. Again, as Wade Davis says so well, no description of a people can be complete without reference to the character of their homeland, to the ecological and geographical matrix in which they have determined to live out their destiny. Just as a landscape defines character, culture springs from a spirit of place. So wayfinding is not just about taking a trip or going where no one has gone before. It's not just about getting from point A to point B, as modern architects and signage designers would have you believe. Wayfinding is a dialogue, and it's also the human faculty for engaging in dialogue with the essential speech of the land and seas and stars and elemental forces of nature. This great dialogue teaches us how to best participate in the living systems of our beautiful planet. It teaches us how to participate in the collective of all species and all domains of conscious life. In the act of wayfinding, we discover all the ways nature encodes wisdom in beauty. And if we learn the languages of nature, we will absorb this wisdom. And by doing so, never forget that we evolve by investing in collective thriving. So wayfinding leads us to discover the best coordinates for our own nature, the best landscapes for our own success as a species, the best places for the evolution of human consciousness as part of the conscious universe, the best places to nurture our unique cultures, which give rise to the creative variety that transcendent growth depends on. So let's listen to a few more words from Wade Davis, who has written so beautifully about this theme in his book titled The Wayfinders. Wade says to us, first about a culture, the full measure of a culture embraces both the actions of a people and the quality of their aspirations and the nature of the metaphors that propel their lives. And he continues, as cultures wither away, individuals remain, often shadows of their former selves, caught in time, unable to return to the past, yet denied any real possibility of securing a place in a world whose values they seek to emulate and whose wealth they long to acquire. And this creates a dangerous and explosive situation, which is precisely why the plight of diverse cultures is not a simple matter of nostalgia or even of human rights alone, but a serious issue of geopolitical stability and survival. A serious issue of geopolitical stability and survival. So I would add that in our early history, as we went about exercising this amazing capacity to find our way, traveling to so many diverse places in so many diverse ways, that we humans ignited the seeds of human culture within our species through wayfinding. Culture is a phenomenon that depends on diversity of expression, just as nature does. And it's also true that the stability of human consciousness depends on our participation in the weaving of diversity we call nature. The more we demand sameness and oppose what is different, the less willing we are to step out on the wayfinder's journey, and the more our collective fabric disintegrates. Wayfinding originally took us far and wide, but now my sense is it can bring us home. So, Todd, let's find our way into the depths of this amazing human ability.
There's so much to jump off into from that introduction, and thank you to Wade Davis for all that he provided there as well.
Yeah.
The wayfinding home strikes me because I think we talked about Joseph Campbell in the last episode. There's this notion of wayfinding is moving away from going out and exploring what has not been seen before, but to make our way back home. I didn't expect that. And when we say home, we're not thinking of the house on top of a hill or in the woods or in a development. We're thinking of the place where we can truly be ourselves, where our power can manifest, where we're connected. I guess that is the freedom that comes from wayfinding home, moving towards that which sustains us.
Yeah, it's what really amazes me about consciousness, and I was just talking to a group of people about this morning, is that in full human consciousness, we're working with complementarities simultaneously. And so this capacity of wayfinding to walk into the unknown and keep going that is where we discover everything we need to know. And that walking into the unknown is what brings us home.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one or the other, it's both at the same time. And I think, I mean, you've heard me talk about this so much that one of the big problems with modern consciousness is we focus our awareness in this tiny little part of the brain that's designed to separate A from B. Is it this or is it that? And so all of these great complementarities that are always working together simultaneously, we can't perceive because we're using our awareness to separate everything.
Right.
And I think it's causing us great distress. And I think culture is crumbling around that distress.
In the introduction, you talked about dialogue with the landscapes, dialogue with the territory. And I was thinking about that word across, dia, logos, normally translated as word, but we could say it as speech. So speech across, and not necessarily speech with words, but communication of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it feel like or look like to be in dialogue with the non-human world? We're not talking about speaking to trees, though I do that. I admit that I talk to trees, but what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about experiencing the life cycles of everything around us. We're talking about experiencing, to put it very simply, how the world works and how we fit in. If you are an indigenous farmer in the Andes, you used to be able to, quote unquote, listen to the speech of the stars, the position of the stars, and you used to be able to read the speech of haze that would form in the atmosphere or not form in the atmosphere. And the combination of that, the presence or absence of haze at a certain time of astronomical conjunction, would give you very precise information about your planting season. That's an example. If you were living as a nomadic hunter in the Arctic, the speech of the ice is what you listen to. They could read the ice and know exactly how thick it was and exactly when it was safe to cross. They could read the speech of the coastline as a reflection in cloud cover. And the nomadic cultures in the Arctic had more accurate maps of the coastline than the Russian explorers who first sailed up the west coast of North America. You listen to the speech of the rivers. If you're a Native American culture and your culture is based in fishing, you listen to the speech of the river because it will tell you about the cycles of the water, and it will tell you when the salmon are returning and when it's okay to fish and how much you can take so you don't deplete your own resource. So you're participating in the cycles of life where you live. And we have most of these examples from what we call indigenous cultures. We really don't know what it means to listen to the speech of the land now. But I would say if you live in a place like where I live in California, where we've had terrible forest fires, if the people in charge of the forests could still hear the speech of the trees and the grasses and the winds and the waters, they would know how to manage all of the forest and the ground covers and everything else that we do to minimize destructive fires, but they don't know the language anymore. I think the same is true when we invented plastic. If we had been able to listen to the speech, the molecular level speech of organic elements, maybe we would have invented something other than plastic. Those are examples of what we're talking about. So it's not language. Yeah. The Mayans say, this is from Martin Preptel. He reported the way the Mayans say this is that the nature of a thing is its speech. And so the nature of grass to grow is the speech of the grass, and the nature of a tree blooming in the spring is that tree saying it's springtime. And they're quite poetic about it. But if, wherever we live, if you have maybe you look at the sky and you have a sense that there's weather coming, and the weather report says no weather coming, but you were right. You heard the speech of something in the skies, in the waters as they evaporated and moved up to become clouds. That's also the speech. And if you're wayfinding, you have to listen to the speech of whatever territory you're engaging. The Polynesian navigators learned the speech of the ocean, which came to them in the size of waves, in the colors of the waters, in the interaction of wind and water, and the interaction of land and water and wind. And those are all examples of speech.
You said that we don't know what that means now for modern culture. What is our equivalent to listening to the rivers to know where and when to fish, or where and when to plant? I know you well enough to know how responsive you are to your environment. And this is about more than gardening and making sure that you have food and water, that there is also a dialogue that goes beyond just sustenance, that is about thriving, that is about living well, and it's not necessarily about clear signals that this means that. A knowing that comes from being connected.
Yeah, that's a very important point. I mean, if we just go back to my little example of the forest fires and listening to the land and the trees and so on, most Western people would take that as, oh, I'm going to learn the language of the forest to prevent a disaster. But what you've just pointed out is that that's not really the point. The learning the language of the forest and the winds and the weather patterns and so on is for the propagation of the forest and all of the species that the forest supports, and in turn how all of that weaving of natural systems supports humankind. So it's for the continuation of life. It's for the continuing cycles of blossoming into states of fulfillment. It's for the ongoing evolution of thriving. It's really not about preventing disasters.
So if we put this in an organizational context, which we do most episodes, the landscape includes the humans within the landscape. And when a leader steps into a culture, let's say it's a new CEO, steps into a new leadership team, meets the staff, meets the leadership team, meets the board, gets to know clients, customers, partners. There's a landscape there too that is also connected to the land. It's not disconnected from the land, but that culture is part of the landscape. If we translate what we've talked about here in the last 20 minutes, there's a tendency in that time to look for the right playbook of how do I win trust? How do I make this the type of culture where people love to come to work and they bring their gifts? And so that looking for the right playbook, which is, I would say, the default tendency, is akin to reading the signs, as we talked about in the introduction. It's not the landscape itself. I've seen leaders who don't operate from the playbook, but they have a very hard time describing why they did what they did. And I feel great compassion for them. We live in a world in which you need a compass, a map, a guidebook, a playbook, and that needs to be validated, that needs to have been proven, that needs to be backed up by data. Right. And we live in a world where there is so much complexity, beautiful complexity. I'm not criticizing it. Beautiful complexity, that the fact that we think the playbooks could suffice, the current maps are good enough, there's a disconnect for me, that there has to be access to some greater body of wisdom in which we can respond to move things towards thriving, rather than pulling something off of a shelf that was proven 6 months or 6 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. I mean, it's tragic what's happened to modern consciousness and the modern idea of the world. And I think you're right that looking for that right playbook is exactly like looking for the science. And it's just the wrong way. You know, Melodoma Somé used to talk about his people would, when they wanted to know something, they would go ask nature. Because nature is the larger force. Nature is constantly evolving and constantly creating new form and adding wisdom to the universe encoded in beauty. And who are humans to think that they can know more than the whole mass of natural systems working together, evolving right in front of us? And, you know, the human need to know why. Give me a reason. Give me a reason. Consciousness doesn't operate on why. And creativity, if it's conscious creativity, doesn't source from need. It sources, as Don Manuel said, it sources from wholeness. Creativity sources from wholeness. And when we stop to ask why and show me and prove it and how, we're stopping the flow of our own consciousness. We're stepping out of the flow of those systems that are informing us and showing us every step to take every moment. I mean, it's really nuts. So if I'm that new CEO and I come into a new company, what my job is to listen to the entire company, listen to the people, listen to the actual organization. It has its own speech. I would be looking at how that whole place was organized, and if there were, I'd look at the rule book in HR, and I'd look at other, you know, corporate frameworks, and the whole thing is speech. And I would absorb the speech of that whole company as a new CEO. And then I would not ask the framework that is the existing company I've stepped into. I would ask the larger consciousness of its people. I would ask the larger consciousness of the company's clients and the world that they live in for input. Because my job in that new company is going to be to refine what we might call the organization or the framework of its consciousness. I'm going to refine that, but I'm going to refine it by flowing new information in, so that organization can evolve. If I just start adjusting the rule book and I start saying, well, this is why I'm doing this, that's why you're doing that, I'm keeping the consciousness of the company in two dimensions where I really can't change anything. So it's a really good analogy, because every organization is a landscape unto itself. And there's a tremendous amount of information in the way relationships that form an organization operate, the way two people in two different positions need to work together, the way teams work together, the way a team leader and the teams work, the way the upper level management and the mid level management work. All of these relationships, there's language there. Are they using the principles of consciousness? Do they understand how to take advantage of complementarities? You can use the metaphors of the elements of creation, fire and water and air and earth. What's the vision of the company? What's the level of fluidity in the company? What's their grounding? What's their sense of belonging? And I would listen, because this is all speech. And it's not going to be found in the rule book, so to speak, or the playbook. It's found in the living, breathing, experiential relationships, the moment-to-moment experiences of people in the company. And I think we've lost the capacity to recognize that that is speech and to understand that speech. So as the new CEO, I would have to remember that the nature of a thing is its speech. I want to study the nature of the company, which ultimately is the human nature of the company.
The nature of that speech is known by a leader who is deeply listening, and that it is not equivalent to their policies, their strategies, what's on their website. It's the relationships, the intangibles, the dynamics of all of the people affiliated with the organization, and the informal ways in which they interact, not just the formal organization. I think we should pause and give a little encouragement and hope to our Wayfinder leaders, because they are probably listening right now and saying, yes, this is how I am leading, or my team, or my group, my organization, and I am constantly asked why or how, or can you put this on paper? And how did you reach this conclusion? And to find ways to bridge the world that is all about formality and mechanics and that which is visible and has form with this larger world. It requires incredible communication capacity to be able to let the people know around you that you are listening and that you are helping nudge to this collective thriving, but they may not understand it in the sense that I think what is usually required of leaders in terms of explanations and definitions.
Yeah, and that's that constant Western pressure to stay in what I call the two-dimensional domain of consciousness, which is getting from A to B to C, focusing on causality. Are we there yet? Yes, no, good, bad. And these are the realms in which awareness is sitting in the parts of our brain that create reason and create logic, but and create language itself. But those regions of our brain, they're creating these chunks of output. They don't use them, they just create them. So some part of us is knowing the world long before we create a reason, long before we create a why or an HR manual. We've already experienced the world. That's where we get the material to make anything logical or linear. And there's such a lack of dimensional consciousness in Western culture. I think people don't even realize that they're pushing themselves back into this dimensional flatland where you can't really change anything. There's just pressure and repetition. And I think one of the biggest things that we can bring to organizations is a little bit of experiential play, a little bit of learning to feel. And I don't mean have an emotional response. I mean learning to use the senses. Imagine, some companies have gyms and spas and cafeterias and all this stuff. What if there was a place where you could just go exercise your senses? A place where you could play with sound and sight and music and kinesthetic stuff, and maybe this is a new business for us, Todd.
Marty, this is a grand idea. I'm going to delete this part from the episode so we can pursue it. No, just kidding.
Okay. Yeah, great.
We're sharing this with the world. You can contact us if you want to pursue it further.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, this is really the impasse, is that people do not realize that they're missing most of the dimensions of consciousness, which means they're missing most of their capacity to create meaning and to see new kinds of action that they could take, to identify new kinds of value that they create. They're missing the capacity because they're processing information in such a limited way. And so the wayfinding, here's wayfinding, here's the territory that we want to help take people into. It's the territory of experiential intelligence. This is human capacity. We actually, whether you like it or not, we know the world through our senses first, not through language, not through reason. Those are all outcomes. The very first thing you know is through the sight, the sound, the touch, the smell, we call it the inner knower in the traditions, the things you know instantly because you've experienced their energy. That's how we know the world, but that's a mystery to most humans on the planet now. That's the landscape that we need to take our wayfinders into.
Going back to Wade Davis's statement that you need to know where you've been to know where you are. I had a story just pop into my memory of turning 18 years old, and my buddies kidnapped me out of a friend's bed. They blindfolded me, tied up my wrists and ankles, put me in the trunk of a car. I'm not going to disclose names so that they take no heed over this. But my buddies drove me in a trunk of a car to someplace, obviously, I did not know where it was, and then took off the ropes that were binding me and my blindfold, and I was in the middle of a dark woods. They were giving me a challenge where they wanted me to follow a voice and then follow a light, and it was really ended up being beautiful. But I remember that disorientation of it is pitch dark. I have no idea where I am. And I have no light, nothing other than the natural moonlight. Now, they were kind and loving enough that they helped me find the next waypost. But I realized I had no idea where I was until I saw a clearing, and I knew that clearing, but I didn't know that I knew that clearing. I had been in those woods before, and even though it was dark, I knew the clearing. And my body just relaxed, because even though this was exciting and full of adrenaline, I was scared.
Yeah, I bet.
I was scared. And I trusted my friends, but they were 17, 18 too. So it's not like we had the best judgment at that age.
Oh, God.
And I realized how terrifying it is to be dropped somewhere where you don't know where you are, where you came from.
Yeah.
And I have this sense that a lot of people live that way. They don't know the coordinates to which they are right now.
Right.
And how terrifying that must be.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Most of the people who come into training with me are feeling that. That's the first thing they want to know is, where are they? Is there anywhere to come home to? And it's another thing that really bothers me about Western culture is that we throw away our history and we don't remember where we come from. So how could we possibly know where we are or what things mean where we are? And how could we possibly understand the resources available to us because we don't understand the place that we are? I think having roots is critical. And yet we throw that away. But the other thing that we're saying, the other side of the coin, is that it is in our nature as human organisms to find the spot where we can set down roots.
Yes.
And so this is another way to understand what we need to do as modern wayfinders, is to go out into that crazy mess out there. And once again, by feeling, experiencing the land, the world that we have, everything out there, you will find the spot where you can set down your roots and come home to yourself first.
That feels so important.
Yeah.
Because that also gives more of an orientation than a destination to the wayfinding itself. I'm thinking about that children's book of, I can't remember which animal that went around asking you, are you my mother? Are you my mother? Are you my mother?
Oh, yeah.
And it feels like that is also similar to the not knowing where we are. Is like, is this my land? Are these my people? Is this my purpose? All of these similar questions, when what we are saying is that you already have the identity that you can tap into, plus you have this capacity to find a new place to set down your roots. Because I think we've extensively talked about identity here on this podcast, and not in terms of gender, race, and all of that, by that from which you came, which I think is also a deeper meaning of what Wade Davis is saying, of you don't know where you are unless you know where you've been. It's not just a physical location. It's not just a memory of places you've been. It is that deep sense of, this is why I'm here, that's connected to the people who have come before me and stand beside me.
Yeah, and that discovery is of both our genius and our belonging. That is the modern wayfinder's journey. Humans have walked on pretty much every inch of the earth by now, so the literal geographical journeys are few and far between at this point. But we have this journey into the soul of who we are as a species, into the soul of who we are as individuals. And the wayfinding is to find our place in the collective again, and to come home to the genius that we carry, to come home to what we do belong to. And, you know, in indigenous cultures, they will talk about belonging to the way of your specific talent. And they will talk about belonging to the land where you were born. We no longer live in a geographical location where 10 generations have lived. That time for humans is gone. But belonging and coming home to ourselves and finding our way home to ourselves, that's our constant journey. And I really love the way the Dagara in West Africa talk about this, that your total identity is a combination of your genius, whatever gift you have, claiming that, and the land that you belong to. Those two things together, your genius and your belonging, nature and earth within you, woven together, that's your total identity. And with that total identity, you can blossom yourself out into the world. But most people in the modern world, you know, we've moved from where we were born even. And where we were born, that's not where our grandparents and great-grandparents probably came from. And I would suggest for people who are listening to us that one of the ways you can belong to the land is remember, I think we've talked about this, remember the land where you were born. Find out about the geography of that particular place and the powers and the beauty of that particular land, whatever it is, whether it's prairies or mountains or river deltas. That wisdom and that beauty is in you, and you belong to that. And then you also belong to the land where you're living. And the power of the land where you're living knows you. And whatever that geography is, whatever the fertility and the cycles of winds and weathers and waters there, you belong to that. So let that be your belonging in the land, and let yourself be claimed by the genius that you carry, and weave those together to find your way home to you. And then you, in your wholeness, remember creativity sources from wholeness. In that wholeness of your own identity, you can blossom into the world, create your path in life.
Wow, Marty. That is so beautiful that I feel like it's a good place to pause. And maybe the reason that we get along so well is that we were only born, 250 miles apart. It wasn't that far, but not in the same decade.
Really not in the same decade. Although it feels like it was in the same moment somehow.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was really beautiful. I think maybe we can blossom some other conversations from this. But I think at this pause, Todd, you must have an amazing potentiality for us today.
Potentialities. Potentialities.
I've been noticing something across business, culture, and leadership lately. We seem caught between two extremes. On one side, there's recklessness. People charging forward with entitlement or self-righteousness or simply to be seen as action-oriented, even when those actions cause more harm than good. On the other, complete paralysis. Leaders and organizations frozen in place, endlessly making pro and con lists, waiting for conditions to somehow become easier before taking any step at all. Both responses make me angry, and I've been trying to understand why. I've been thinking about this. Living itself is risky. Loving, especially, is risky. Many people shield themselves from risk, and in doing so, shield themselves from living. Because to truly love a person, a purpose, a place, a possibility, or life itself is to open yourself to hurt and loss. This isn't abstract. When you love your work, you risk it not working. When you love people, you risk losing them. When you love this world, you risk heartbreak at what's unfolding. The depth of your love is the measure of your vulnerability. But here's the thing. This isn't a risk to be calculated and managed. This is the fundamental nature of being alive. You cannot love without risking loss. You cannot be connected to the world without feeling what happens in it. The paralyzed person thinks they're avoiding risk by holding back their love, by keeping their commitments conditional, by staying defended, but they're not avoiding risk. They're avoiding life itself. The reckless person isn't loving at all. They're performing, proving, protecting themselves, sometimes through constant motion. Their risk-taking isn't in service to anything they genuinely love. It's in service to their image or their fear or their need to feel powerful. I returned recently from a trip to the United States where I witnessed this paralysis up close. I watched as months of exploration and consideration arrived at a threshold and movement simply stopped. Not because information was lacking, not because the path forward wasn't clear enough, but because every possible step had become a risk to be calculated rather than a reality to be felt. And I realized something's missing. It's not courage. It's not better analysis. It's not more certainty. What was missing is connection with the world itself. The word risk has two competing etymologies, and both tell us something important about what we've lost. The first traces back through Italian risco to Latin resicum, thought to come from the Greek rhiza, meaning root, and was used to describe a cliff or reef at sea, a real feature of the landscape, something navigators had to track and respond to, not a probability to calculate, but an actual presence in the world they were moving through. The second etymology of risk traces to Arabic, risk, meaning gift of divine providence or livelihood. This became medieval Latin risicum and appeared in maritime contracts, the portion of life that sustains you, the relationship between what you give and what comes back. Notice what both meanings have in common. They're about relationship with what actually is. The reef is there. The livelihood emerges from genuine exchange. Neither is about prediction or calculation. Both are about presence and response. And this is what we've lost. We've turned risk into abstract calculation, something to be assessed, managed, mitigated, rather than what it originally meant, a living relationship with the territory we're actually moving through. The ancient Greeks gave threshold spaces to Hermes, not because he made choices safer, but because he understood something we've forgotten, that certain territories cannot be crossed by calculation alone. Hermes wasn't the god who eliminated risk. He was the god who moved with it. He lived at crossroads, at borders, at thresholds, places where you must choose a direction not by analyzing probabilities, but by tracking what the territory itself is revealing. What made him the guide of souls wasn't his power to predict outcomes. It was his capacity to remain in relationship with the realm of the living and the dead, with gods and mortals, with what was and what might be. He was fluid, adaptive, awake, not because he had better information, but because he maintained connection with what actually is. Mm-hmm. The Greeks also knew Hermes as the god of windfall, the fruit that has already fallen from the tree. What comes to you not through your plans, but through your presence, what cannot be calculated, but can be received. This is what happens when we stop trying to calculate risk and start moving in genuine relationship with the world. We begin to receive what we never could have predicted. When we're truly connected to the world, when our awareness is actually on what is rather than on what we fear might happen, we're not calculating risk. We're tracking, we're sensing, we're responding. Watch a deer moving through the forest at dusk. Every sense alive, every muscle ready. Is the deer calculating the probability of predator encounters, running risk assessments, making contingency plans? No, the deer is in relationship with the forest, tracking what each moment reveals, responding to what it senses, not what it imagines might occur. This is presence without calculation, movement without the endless internal dialogue of risk assessment, aliveness. The reckless person has lost this connection. They're not actually feeling the world, not sensing consequence, not in relationship with what their actions touch. They're performing action often to avoid the discomfort of genuine feeling. They're numb, not brave. The paralyzed person has also lost connection. They're trying to think their way through what can only be felt, trying to calculate what can only be tracked, trying to predict what can only be discovered by actually moving and paying attention to what moves back. Both extremes signal the same disconnection. So what becomes possible when we stop calculating and start moving in connection? We discover the territory itself has intelligence. The landscape speaks, but we only hear this speech when we're in actual relationship, when we've taken real steps. The territory doesn't reveal itself to those standing at the threshold running scenarios. It reveals itself to those who have begun walking and are paying attention. We also realize that what we called risk was often just our fear of irreversibility. We weren't actually afraid of danger. We were afraid of foreclosure, that stepping into one path means others close. We say one yes, and that might mean 99 no's, that we might be changed by what we move through in ways we cannot predict or control. But this is precisely what connection requires. When you're in relationship with the world, you're being changed by it. The path you're on creates you as you create the path. And finally, we remember something our culture has trained us to forget, that we are part of the world, not separate observers calculating how to move through it safely. When we're connected, we feel the potential ripple effects of our movements, not as abstract calculations, but as lived realities in our bodies, in our relationships, in the systems we're a part of. People often call me a risk taker, but I don't see myself that way. What they're seeing from the outside, the willingness to make moves others find too risky, isn't actually about risk tolerance or courage or fearlessness for me. It's about connection. When I'm deciding to move in a particular direction, I'm tracking the territory, sensing what wants to happen, paying attention to what the landscape is revealing. Do I calculate sometimes? Of course. I too get caught up in speculating, overthinking, and scenario planning. But most of the time, that's not what's guiding me at a deeper level. What guiding is something I can only describe as a felt sense of using my awareness out onto the world, tracking what the situation itself is showing me, not what my fears are projecting onto it. Sometimes this leads me to take steps others consider risky. Sometimes it leads me to wait when others think I should move. But in both cases, The movement or stillness isn't coming from calculation. It's emerging from relationship with what actually is. Our world needs leaders right now who can respond to what's happening at every level. I could easily say we need more risk takers. Now is the time to take some risks. But what am I really saying? Be impulsive? Be willing to endanger yourself and those around you? That's not it at all. What we actually need are people who can restore their connection with the world, who can feel what's happening, track what's real, and respond with their whole being, awake to what might happen. Mm-hmm. What I'm pointing toward is the willingness to love enough that risk becomes inseparable from that love, where you move not because you've calculated the odds, but because something or someone matters enough that you cannot not respond. And here's what I see as the potentiality, a glimpse of what becomes possible. What if our current confusion about risk, the oscillation between recklessness and paralysis, the endless calculating and second guessing, is not actually about risk at all? What if it's about disconnection? And what if the way forward isn't getting better at assessing risk, but to restore our connection with the world itself? Because when you're genuinely connected, when your awareness is on what is rather than on imagined dangers, something shifts. You stop trying to predict and start learning to track. You stop calculating and start responding. You stop standing at thresholds and start walking, paying exquisite attention to what each step reveals. This isn't about eliminating danger. Real cliffs and reefs exist. Genuine consequences are real. But when you're connected, you're not relating to these as abstract possibilities. You're relating to them as living realities to be tracked and responded to. The god Hermes stands at every crossroads, not to help you calculate which path is safer, but to remind you of something. The crossing itself is what matters, not the conclusion you reach beforehand, but the quality of presence and awareness you bring to that threshold. Perhaps he asks, not have you calculated correctly, but are you connected? Are you ready? Are you feeling the world? Are you paying attention to what's actually here? Or are you lost in imagined futures and feared outcomes? This isn't recklessness. It isn't paralysis. It's something older and more alive than either of those extremes, a way of moving through our world that our ancestors knew and that the wild has never forgotten. It's available to us still, not through better calculation, but through deeper connection. Not through managing risk more effectively, but through remembering what risk originally meant. The reef that's actually there, the livelihood that emerges from genuine exchange, the territory that teaches when we're present enough to be taught.
Oh, Todd, that was, I think, one of the most important pieces you've ever contributed to our ongoing dialogue. That was marvelous.
Thank you, Marty.
That was awesome.
You might have been able to pick up on the fact that this topic of risk has really been moving in me. And the writing of this essay has vastly helped in reorienting myself towards the whole thing.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I think it's helped a lot of people reorient. It was just really, really brilliant. And I talk to so many people these days who are afraid to take a risk. And I think everyone needs to listen to your beautiful words. And I love what you said about risk is inseparable from love, which is true. Risk is inseparable from life.
Yep.
And it's really about connection, our presence and our connectivity in the world. Really awesome.
Marty, what takeaway do you want to offer our listeners today?
I I'm going to do this, so I invite everybody to join me. I'm going to listen to this episode a whole bunch of times because this topic of wayfinding, even the arrival in our collective consciousness here between Todd and me, the arrival of landscapes as a chunk of consciousness that said, talk about me, talk about landscapes. And the arrival of the principle of wayfinding showed up and said, this needs to be unfurled for your audience. I think we all need to walk into this territory of possibility and potentiality with our hearts open and our critical minds turned off, and just experience again the awesomeness of being human. So thank you for that, Todd. It's amazing. And Todd, do you have a takeaway?
Couple things. One, the notion of walking towards roots. That image of the movement plus the solidity of roots. That is sticking with me. And the other is just this word wayfinder is so beautiful. And I loved being able to talk about it for an hour.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me that it's not the way. It's not finding the way.
Right.
It's finding our way. And so that big capital T, the, which relates to the playbook and the models and that which we want to know what's going to happen before it happens. And I'm going to find the way. I really felt the alternative to that in this conversation today about what it is like to find our way as a process, the keep on keeping on of wayfinding.
Yeah. Oh, that's really brilliant, and it ties into this all-important skill we need to reclaim or be reclaimed by, which is to simply be in the moment and engage life as it unfurls. That's another way to understand wayfinding. That's really beautiful. Wow, thank you so much, Todd, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today here at Leading from Being. We are very excited to continue this conversation and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Get outside, find your way, do some wayfinding. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Leading from Being. You can learn more at leadingfrombeing.com, including contact information for Marty and Todd. Our theme song is courtesy of Cloud Cult.